Perhaps if I can assist to clarify. Senator, I can assure you this work has been happening for some time around public end safety zones at Australian airports. In response to...
Sorry, we got the head of CASA here says he doesn't know, and you're telling us that this work is happening and has been for some time?
I think Mr Carmody was talking about what is his statutory role in public end safety zones. Right. What I to explain is that this work has been going for some time. In 2012, we formed the National Airport Safeguarding Framework, which was deliberately safeguarding framework. Yes, and that was formed at our initiative with the states and territories.
Who's our? As opposed to CASA?
The department's initiative in 2012 to deal with a range of safety issues, including wind shear, wildlife hazard, safety zones and the like. We've been working with states and territories since that time. This was a difficult process to get all of the states and territories involved in this. As you know, the challenges of land use planning in a federal framework. The group was formed in 2012. It was agreed through the Ministerial Transport Council at that time to form this group as a working group across the jurisdictions. Since that time, the Commonwealth and Queensland have been working on a guideline for public safety areas for aerodromes. There is no such guideline in place in Australia at this time. There is very limited guidance available from the International Civil Aviation Organisation into such runway safety zones, and we have been looking and researching examples such as the one raised by Senator Xenophon in the UK and the United States. The current situation is that a draft guideline is being prepared and finalised by the Commonwealth and Queensland, which is due to shortly go out to the other jurisdictions for consideration. There has been some resistance by some jurisdictions to having such a land use planning requirement. However, we are working this through. And this has been prompted by concerns over many years, including by raised here and Senator Fawcett and others, around this issue of the lack of such guidance to Australian land use planners, both on and off airport. Sorry, I just wanted to get...
Well, just a closing question. To what extent is CASA embedded in this important work? Are they represented? Are they briefed?
Yes, they are. The CASA works with the department in relation to the NASAG process.
Look, I don't want to put you on the spot, Mr Carmody. It'd be my last question. It didn't seem in your answers, and perhaps mine and Senator Xenophon's questions might not have been clear enough, it didn't seem from your answers that you had even an inkling about this work that's happening in this space.
I think, to be fair to Mr Carmody, he's relatively recently moved to CASA, and this has been a series of works, Chair, if I may, that's been going for some time. So I think it's probably beholden on me to take responsibility for explaining to the committee just where this work is at.
Sorry, Senator Xenophon.
And Chair, if I may, I think Mr Teedy did mention the work that's been going on with NASAG since 2010 in the answer to Senator Xenophon before, so we thought we'd covered that. I'm trying to work out where this was going. But thank you.
Well, Mr Murdoch, the fact is the National Airport Safeguarding Advisory Group has been going since 2012. It'll be its 5th anniversary this year sometime, yet it has yet to include guidelines for public safety zones. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's yet to conclude.
So how much longer will we have to wait for these guidelines?
We are scheduled for the next meeting of the group to look at the draft guideline. We've been completing guidelines in a range of other areas, as I mentioned some early ones. This is one that is outstanding, and it was discussed, and my officers may wish to add, it was discussed at recent meetings of the NASAG. We are trying to conclude this draft guideline as quickly as possible.
Respectfully, Mr Murdoch, that's all well and good, but there's a primary role here, an explicit role under the Civil Aviation Act, and Section 9 in particular, as to CASA's function, essentially about ensuring the safety of the travelling public on aircraft for CASA to undertake. I mean, there's a clear statutory role, Mr Carmody. I understand you're acting CEO, you're relatively new in this position, but is there a role, do you consider that there is a direct role, leaving aside this National Airports Safeguarding Advisory Group, to say this is not safe, to do an actual assessment, to say we don't think this is safe? Whilst you can't tell a state government what to do, you can say we don't think it's safe to have a big structure within 500 metres of the runway.
And I think, Senator, the approach has been thus far to input that sort of information into the process that Mr Murdoch is talking about, where all the views are considered, including a view such as the one you
No,
suggest.
but what's your role? But don't you see a more direct role for CASA in this to say, no, this is not acceptable? Have you done an audit of airports around the country where buildings could be in the line of sight of the runway?
I think we're dealing with buildings and obstacles at airports around the country all the time, Senator. I can't say we've done an audit, but I'm sure that Mr Teedy, running airports and aerodromes, is familiar with all of our aerodromes. That's what we do in a safety sense all the time.
Can I just, Chair, I just want to ask very briefly questions in relation to the story that was broadcast on the ABC on Wednesday, the 15th of February, to do with the Air Services Australia. I know you're not Air Services Australia, but you're familiar with the where there were emails leaked from insiders warning that the job cuts are a huge risk to public safety. Can I ask you, is there an obligation for those that received that email, obviously one person involved with Air Services, an employee of Air Services, to be notified of those concerns? I mean, is there a mandatory type reporting requirement for those up the line of a very concerned person within Air Services who said there are some serious risks to the travelling, a huge risk to public safety? And you're familiar with the emails.
Yes, I'm familiar with the article and the ABC story. And
with the email.
And the email from, if that was the one from the national, the control.
Yes.
The NOC.
The NOC, the National, yes, that's correct.
No, National Operations
National Operations Centre. I'm familiar with that, and I've discussed that with the committee as well a couple of weeks ago.
Yes. But that was, if you can tell us publicly, whether, just following that, is there an obligation to notify CASA of this sort of email if it's reported? If you have an employee within Air Services saying, I've got serious concerns about safety, is there a requirement using the just culture principles to be notified of those concerns so that you can look into it?
We'd expect that notification to come through the normal process.
Well, did it? I mean, this email was the 29th of December, the first one, and one a week later. Were you aware of it before it hit the ABC?
I wasn't, Senator.
No, and I wasn't either, Senator. The reporting of safety incidents of that nature could take advantage of the ATSB confidential reporting system, the REPCON system. Air Services Safety Management System has reporting functions in terms of all incidents, and a submission could have been made through that safety management system, perhaps depending on the parameters of that safety management
system. Would ATSB
be
required to tell you?
If it's relevant to us.
Yes, if it's relevant to safety, they would.
Do you regard this as relevant, the material in that email?
Yep. It's a view, Senator. There's a lot of discussion about what was in that email. But there are numerous confidential reporting mechanisms that people can use. As we had a discussion at the last committee meeting, the National Operations Centre is not actually involved directly in air traffic control. It's involved in flow management. That was a view of one person. The person's quite entitled to put that view forward. There were other views put forward, as you know, Senator, that run counter to that. But they're quite entitled to put the view forward. Sure, so I was not aware of the email until.
No, I understand what you're saying. It was one view.
Yep.
And the person said that the Accelerate program, as a result, it is putting the company, its reputation, its staff, and the travelling public at significant risk.
Mm-hmm.
This person sent it to a number of others within the organisation. Is this the sort of thing you ought to see, and you can make an assessment as to whether you think it ought to be looked at further or not?
I think it's the type of information that we would frequently see. The question is a question of whether of its validity.
What do you mean by validity?
Well, someone has a point of view. They're very entitled to use the confidential reporting mechanisms to put that point of view forward.
And how do you assess whether this is relevant, whether this carries weight, whether it needs to be investigated further?
If it came to us, we would go to Air Services and ask their view. We would validate it. We'd see
But it
whether it
didn't
was
come to
correct
you,
or not.
though.
But it did not. It did not.
Does it concern, do you think it should have come to you before it hit the media?
I would prefer it to have come to us before it hit the media, and as I said, there are numerous opportunities for people to send that information to us. I get emails all the time, Senator, from various people, including complaints or issues or concerns, probably almost on a daily basis. So they come directly to us, or they come through the reporting mechanism. So there are ample opportunities.
Can I ask, and finally in relation to this, this has been out now for, a couple of weeks almost. Mm-hmm. Has CASA spoken to this person, the author of the email, or the people that this person sent the email to?
No, we have not, Senator. We've looked at the...
Do you plan to?
Not specifically, no.
No.
We would.
So you weren't too concerned by the email, the contents of the email? That's your assessment?
We were concerned. The reporting came to me over breakfast through ABC News. The reporting was in association with a traffic event at Tullamarine. We looked into that traffic event and satisfied ourselves that there was it was within the bounds of a normal day's operation for air traffic control, that event.
But the staff cuts, the issues raised about the staff cuts, does that concern you?
They do concern it in the greater inquiry about Accelerate, but in terms of an evidence base for that, we don't yet have.
Sorry.
I was going to say, we